Ahoy there, Legion! Sad but frankly unsurprising news today, as it looks like Warframe's time is coming to a close. No game rules forever. Anyone who is honest with themselves saw this in the works. I'll be generous and say since at least the start of 2018. We tried to warn them and suggest ways to improve and avoid this fate, but the rampant unending delays and the chaos within the office and management didn't help. But we could very well be seeing the final nails being applied to the coffin. And they're being driven in with a moral superiority and utter lack of self-reflection or the implications for the hundreds of workers at the studio. That's quite the introduction, and title for the video for that matter, if I do say so myself. But rest assured, through the power of math, I'll demonstrate how this is far from clickbait. Also, upon finishing up the rounds, I noticed a curious Twitter conversation between, well, I'll just say I think I have a pretty good idea who is involved removing Dan in the first place. And since they have no problem calling out offensive tweets, I'm sure they don't mind if I take a peek at their own. We got tons to talk about, so I don't want to spend too long on any one thing, and I might be speaking faster than normal, but I want to keep this here train a-rolling, so is that alright? Alright, before I dig in proper, I have a message for DE. I'll put a timestamp in if anyone else wants to jump past this, but this is important and I want it early on so they have a better chance of hearing it. Supposedly, DE creatives can't handle criticism, so they send the grunts on payroll to review that content instead. Fair enough, not all can handle the internet's grilling. So, said grunts then summarize the video into a more palatable state for their tender loving ears. If this is true and one of you at DE are watching this video right now, I sincerely urge you to update your resume or CV or whatever they call it in hockey land, because truly, I think your job as well as the jobs of your friends and coworkers have just been put on the chopping block, and it's only a matter of time until that axe drops. I cannot say when, but the blade is definitely primed above, and as much as some of the higher-ups have sabotaged their own creation's success, they are going to be the ones that get tons of opportunities in the future, and I do not want any of the people actually doing the digital heavy lifting at the bottom of the pile to be at a loss when that time comes. So please take some financial safety precautions and maybe squirrel away some funds if you can. It's crazy out there right now, places are burning and prices are a-climbing. But you just got a heads up, so do the best with the time you have available and be safe. It's not an immediate overnight type of thing. Hopefully it makes it to Christmas bonus territory, but be wary come January. Be January, if you will. Alright, training wheels off. The rest you're gonna have to paraphrase on your own. Good luck. Okay, new details coming to light each day, and if I gotta do a follow-up and correct anything wrong, just let me know, but for now, as of time of recording, this is the best take of the situation we got. 2 main stories, and a third one that popped up as I was following up and making the final checks on all this. First part of the puzzle is Dogman Dan's removal and how that came to be. Second part is the biggie with the lead dev of Warframe and how he just screwed the rest of his staff by selfishly and obviously trying to rub salt into Dan's open wound. And finally, 2 partners who, if DE has any ounce of political neutrality left within themselves, I think there's an argument to be made that their tweets are far more offensive than Dan's. Hard to tell as it's been days and we still have no idea what those new standards are, except that Dan apparently traveled time, broke the new rules in the future, and then came back to the present, or this would look mighty suspicious and one-sided. By the nature of this story, it's obviously going to have to cover some political topics, so this is your heads up there, lads. I'm going to do my best to just stick to the beats and details, but things might be covered you don't ally or agree with. That's fine. Even encouraged. Have ye your own nuanced opinion. That is wonderful. But keep it civil in the comments, even with the folks you don't agree with, okay? And under no circumstance are you to interact with anyone mentioned with this here video. Within this here video, sorry. I repeat, because it's important, no talkie to people mentioned here. Alright, Twitter time, story time. May 31st, the creative lead and pretty much Daddy Warframe himself tweeted, "Can't kneel, can't jog, can't watch birds, can't breathe. Hashtag Black Lives Matter." Next day, June 1st, Digital Extremes as a whole followed suit of its creative game director, tweeting their own support of Black Lives Matter. Also on June 1st, Rebecca reposted this message on the forums. One person asked, quote, "Does this include the toxicity in the partner program?" To which she replied, "Yep, lots of concerns surrounding partner conduct, and that is something we are intending to address with the larger program changes that we mentioned earlier this year." Considering the word toxicity was specified, I think think it's safe to say this was about a specific partner, or two, depending on your position on the situation. 3 days later, June 4th, both Digital Extremes and the official Warframe Twitter stated the exact same message. We have made a $25,000 donation to Black Lives Matter in support of our previous statement. We are also in the process of updating our player systems to better protect against hate speech and racism, including zero-tolerance chat policies. Many are not pleased with the zero-tolerance inclusion, including how badly they handled and to date still deflect nearly all responsibility onto the players themselves, who outed the numerous situations caused by DE's very own abusive, power-hungry moderators, policing language in-game, as well as on the forums. But we covered that a few times over already. Also on June 4th, longtime Warframe partner Dogman Dan was suddenly removed from his position. This is quite the surprise, as the community more or less knows which partners are on shaky grounds, and Dan was neither. In response, he said, "Well, guess I'm not allowed to speak as freely as certain other partners who apparently did not like my opinions on the current issues at hand." He addresses his clan, or guild. "It has always been a shame the double standards of Warframe, Steve, and Rebecca on the team." Included was a picture of the email where DE let him know of his immediate removal. Let's look at the email, break it down, and then go back and see how we got here and how this ties into Warframe and even Digital Extremes now all but guaranteed collapse. Could be wrong, but the numbers ain't looking great. But we'll get to that. Hello, Dan. The Warframe Partner Program is a place for creators to gather who contribute to a welcome space in the community. As developers, it is not our goal to control the political speech of our partners, as you are not representatives of us at Digital Extremes, but we do have program policies against offensive material. A lot to unpack and explain here as they try to set the stage, as well as one very clever mind hack they employed I almost want to commend them for using. Of course, this is my best take at what the doublespeak really translates to, so consider this bit more opinion than fact. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments. Righto. First off, for supposedly having nothing to do with politics, they go out of their way to highlight it has nothing to do with politics. Bit of a tell there. Wonder if they felt their nose after typing it out too. Then they say that partners are not representatives of DE, which is really weird. How could that possibly be true? DE handpicks who their partners are on YouTube, and as Cephalon Jizzo has shown, they give no reason as to why they refuse access to some who even apply repeated times. It isn't automatic, it's not wide open to any or all. You only get in when they want you in. Partners have an entire page dedicated to them. They used their partners' opinions to promote and hype TennoCons in their YouTube channel. And as obvious as it sounds, DE will retweet and promote videos from partners as it boosts positive press and sales for their game, as well as give the partner more views and reach. It is a symbiotic relationship, but we are somehow to believe that they in no way represent DE. Just gonna throw this little hint out there. DE created it and chose to put the word partner in the title. Kinda hard to avoid all those implications when you literally name it the partner program. But you know what? I'll go the extra mile and play a semantics game and say maybe they mean in the most asinine comparison possible that technically partners do not represent DE, but they do represent Warframe, which itself represents DE. I once had an art teacher draw an apple on the chalkboard and ask the class what it was. I kind of feel bad now that I think about it. The, shall we say, less than academic kid who barely showed up to class actually raised his hand for once and said it was an apple. And the teacher said no with a big old smile on her face. Other kids raised their hands saying, confused, and, no, that's an apple. And the teacher kept smiling and saying, no, it's not. After a while, we all got fed up, and she said, this is a line in the shape of an apple. If this is what they're trying to do, it's so minimalistic and infinitesimal of a point it completely goes without saying, and is only there to further try to add some distance between themselves and their own partners. So even if this is what they meant, it's entirely moot at best or a lie of misdirection at worst. I don't want to get sidetracked, but those familiar with DE's prior chat mod fiascos may recognize a similar tactic was attempted to hand wave and splain away all the shenanigans of that one, and I'm going to paraphrase here. The chat mods who were in control of suggestions for the ban list in no way had any part controlling the ban list because DE was the only one to control the ban list. So in theory, DE owns a ship and they are the acting captain of that ship, and they are always the one at the wheel. Only problem is they are so busy and distracted with with other stuff, their heads are buried in random bits and pieces of upcoming content and other things behind the scenes that they cannot see what is immediately in front of them and are blind at the helm, at least when it comes to linguistic endeavors. So they relied upon the guidance of the chat mods to be their eyes and ears to assist them on when and where it's safe to turn the ship. Now, if you rely on someone else's input, do you think that perhaps their perspective and worldview might bias their perception and vision a bit, and thus pass that bias along to you in the process? Back to Dan's letter, and this is where the really clever trick on their part is that I mentioned. Though it is addressed to him, DE isn't speaking to Dan in this message. They're speaking to you. That might sound weird or meta, but outside of the heading and one spiteful blurb at the end, this is 100% intended to be read by anyone other than Dan. They know, based on similar overreactionary bad takes they've had with Ritalius, that this is likely to go public. And as such, drop any pretenses they are explaining the what and why to Dan, and are instead diving right into trying to persuade you at home why they are not just correct, but morally justified in their removal of him. Ever watch an interview, and funny enough, they tend to do this more often in politics, where the guy being interviewed is asked a question, and he nods at the person asking it, but when it's time for him to talk, he suddenly turns and faces directly at the camera? Well, if you didn't notice before, you will now. But those that did notice it previously, notice how weird that is and how much it sticks out? By locking eyes with you, they're hoping to gain a stronger connection with you, and thus make you feel more open to them, certainly more receptive to their opinion, and hopefully gave them your vote, right? I find it rude to the person who asked them the question, and then creepy to see the person staring at the camera like that. But based on the style and speech pattern they are using, that's basically what they're trying to pull here. Virtually, their face is towards Dan, but their eyes are looking at you. They continue. After reviewing your recent tweets, we unfortunately do not feel that you have adhered to our program policies, and at this moment we believe it is best for us to part ways. We are taking the appropriate steps to remove you from the Warframe Partner Program, including the removal of your glyph from in-game. Okay, so now we got something to work with. He did something on Twitter specifically that was definitely not political, but someone somewhere felt was offensive. They don't say what that was, or to who, or who reviewed the validity of the supposed offensive remark, which is awful convenient for them and awfully inconvenient for Dan. We're going to glance through the potentially triggering tweets in question in just a sec. Let's just finish this list off first. And they are removing his glyph, I might add. Not just any means of acquiring it, so you can keep it if you got it. No, all records of it entirely. According to Dan, if you don't have it in use, it is gone. Fans of books will recognize that this is called a memory hole. Hats off to you, DE. Nothing says you're against an overbearing, unfeeling, authoritarian control like copying the 1984 handbook word for word. Did someone on staff get a major from the Ministry of Truth? What the heck's going on over there? Finally, they say in closing, and this is when they shift from looking at you back to just staring at Dan with daggers in their eyes as the smugness comes out. We understand you have a long history with Warframe and the partner program, and we are saddened that your time within our partner community has concluded in this way. Remember, when removing one of your original founding partners that has been with you from struggling, starving indie dev to double-stuffed status, sure, they spread the good word for you and you needed their help the most and nearly had to close down your office, it got so bad. Don't offer them a warning. Don't give them a single benefit of the doubt. You're a big shot now, so make sure not to offer a suggestion to curb back on the politics or ease up a tad on the Twitter feed. Nah, just throw all that loyalty to the curb, and heck, since he's there, might as well stomp him on it for good measure. Okay, letter's done. Outside of the posturing and maneuvering, we got that something offensive on Twitter was supposedly the trigger. Let's see what Dan said to upset them so. To keep things spiffy, I'm gonna do a little timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly magic here and shorten the list down to 3. As god dang do people tweet a lot during the quarantine, jeebus. Yes, there were more. A lot more. But by and large, you can summarize them as this. Boring. Boring, mundane political crap. You know what you're going to see. Depending on what team you're playing on, you're going to be seeing the same crap. I'm not sure it's even worth mentioning the specifics, but his stance, you could say, leans Republican in nature. I don't think it matters on Twitter that much because someone's always wrong about something, so it's kind of like a nonstop game of whose line is it anyway. First up to bat was in response to Steve's initial hashtag Black Lives Matter tweet from May 31st, to which Dan replied to it saying, hashtag all lives matter, not just a select few, race, creed, religion, etc. Once people get that into their heads and see everyone as equal, we can progress forward. As expected with all things political in nature, of course this sparked people to either agree or disagree, and then they squared off. Again, this is pretty mundane, especially for Twitter, as I've seen calls for a whole bunch of stuff, so offensive this ain't. Minor subplot here, some Warframe creators chimed in and the word idiot was exchanged, and even though these were the devs who found objective criticism as, quote, personal attacks, quote, I still doubt this was the offensive theme DE was referring to. Second notable tweet was a clip of David Dorn having been shot trying to stop someone from looting a store. Before I continue, I do want to wish my condolences to his family and community of friends. It's a very tough video to watch, and David was an extremely brave guy. I'm very sorry for your loss. You guys at home already likely know the story, as it's been a few days now, but footage was graphic in nature of the story itself. This could be the offensive one DE was citing, but it is news-based. YouTube has guidelines in place that they say graphic themes can be shown if it's important to tell the story in context. It might not get monetized, but it can exist. Anyone lightly browsing Twitter, Imgur, or Facebook has seen several bodies these weeks, miles of buildings on fire, a whole bunch of wounds and stuff, people surrounded in tear gas. Stuff's crazy out there. I've seen other Warframe partners tweet a fairly similar gory video as well, and they're still around, so I don't think this is it. And the last tweet is notable because of the sheer amount of times Dan shared it. Plus it overlaps with the first tweet I mentioned and that bonus side story I mentioned about the two other Warframe partners I'll get to at the end. It's of a video titled Black Lives Matter is a Leftist Lie. So you can imagine the response that got. It is hosted by two men, opening with one of them proudly saying all lives matter, and runs for just under 7 minutes. He copy-pasted it back to people who disagreed with his initial all lives matter tweet he sent to Steve. Only problem there is when you hit reply on Twitter, it tends to auto-include everyone previously mentioned, so every time Dan sent that video as a response, it auto-tagged Steve in the message as well, so he was spammed by it some 4 or 5 times. The most recent being 4:30 in the morning, London, Ontario time, the day that would end up being Dan's last in the partner program. Pro tip to Twitter users, you can click the group of names you're replying to and uncheck some to help keep that notification spam low. Just a heads up there, just saying. All right, you're caught up. In summary, Dan was removed, no specific information given, something about offensive tweets, and that's that. It was very strange to the other content creators who reacted to the occurrence on Twitter. Not gonna name them, as that's on them if they want to talk about it for themselves on their own channels, but we were all left scratching our heads on just what the heck happened. DE mentioned new partner changes were on the way. Did those go live already? Did the partners know they went live already? Maybe this is the part of the upcoming, but I guess already live, zero tolerance stance. What did he say that was zero toleranceable? Don't you have to sign for those anyway? Or at least they have to get an acknowledgement of a change of policy before they can be hit with the ruled change issue? Isn't a warning customarily given when those changes are so swiftly added? Doesn't being loyal to what was a very small company for the better part of a decade earn you at least that much? Perhaps a heart-to-heart, look, we know you don't agree with the political statement we made, but we got a big donation and photo op thing in the works. Mind dialing that down just a bit for a few days, sort of a thing? But no, Dan got the boot, and that's where the story ends. That is, until someone felt the need to showboat, flex their most humble of virtue signals, and rub a little salt in the wound. The missus and I like to watch the show Bones, or we did when we still watched TV. One episode had a jock beat to death with, I believe, a barbell, and no way to tell who did it. Spoilers, by the end of the episode they figured out who did it. What ended up cracking the case was the guy who did it left, only to come back and spit on the body as a last emotional raspberry to the deceased. If not for that last act of spite, it might not have gotten solved. June 5th, not long after Dan's removal, Steve tweeted, "All lives matter," specifically in quotation marks, meaning he is quoting someone else saying the phrase, with the Nazi from Indiana Jones getting his face melted off. To clarify the relevance, on Twitter, many consider the phrase "all lives matter" as far right. Generally speaking, they consider members of the far right as literal Nazis. Surely the detail that Steve chose to post this quotation, followed by a dying Nazi, was purely a coincidence. And remember, Dan's removal had nothing to do with politics. You have the creative director of Digital Extremes. It doesn't get much higher position than that. The guy who basically dreamt up the idea of Warframe itself, tweeting out a mocking, emotionally self-satisfying, and perhaps taunting quotation barely a day after Dan was removed, when Dan responded to Steve days before with the exact same message. No reasonable person would say these are unrelated. No reasonable person would say there is not a direct link between those tweets. No reasonable person would say this was not political in nature. In Dan's letter, they can deny it all they want, but no reasonable person with greater context of the situation is going to believe it. To clarify some potential confusion, and to keep this on point, this tweet does not say Steve was the one who made the call to remove Dan from the partner program. It does not say who was the one who caused that to happen. That's a separate issue. We're going to come back to that. But this absolutely ties Steve to the celebration of Dan's removal, and that makes DE's future so much worse. You have the company he works at associating and then doubling down by financially supporting a political movement. You have the lead guy behind the creation of Warframe making fun of people who disagree with that political movement, not even opposed, just disagree. Each of these things individually can be fatal for any business long term, but to combine the two with the titillating sensation of feeling morally superior to those you don't agree with, not even behind the scenes, but wide out in the open for all to see and share on Twitter, that says, I want you to know this is what I believe. And if you disagree, you will get treated the exact same way. He didn't try welcoming or encouraging those who didn't see it his way. Instead, he went the shaming and dismissing route. He was so pleased with himself, so utterly delighted to own someone of a contrasting viewpoint and to put them in a perceived place, that he had no idea, by doing so, this proudly and defiantly for all to see, he just pushed away at least half of his player base. Where am I pulling those numbers? Using your fingers to do the math is pretty easy on this one. Half of the players are going to be turned off instantly, which is already shown in comments on Twitter and on the forums. That is, until DE locks them. And then you have those who either agree or disagree with the movement, but don't want politics and their game they enjoy to mix because they play to avoid reality right now. And looking outside, that's a very sensible decision. And because it's political in nature, you got those who are going to reflectively oppose the opposite team no matter what the cause is, because that's just the rules in politics. And it's even going to turn off those who fully support the movement because they see DE's sudden approval of it as entirely fake and hopping on the bandwagon to literally buy back some of the goodwill they lost from having no or broken content for so long. But hey, that's just finger math. Maybe you want something more official. That's fine, we got that too. June 7th. ABC News cites a poll saying 52% of the United States would support deploying the military to end violent protests. The White House puts those numbers even higher at an average of 29% support, 42% strongly support, for a total of 71% combined in favor of having the National Guard called in to support their city's police forces. Honestly, these are darn near staggering high amounts I did not expect to see anywhere near this high. You might be saying, well, those aren't polls asking if people support Warframe or Digital Extremes. It's about the fundamental popularity of protests and riots, and you'd be correct, technically. But DE just allied themselves and paid money to political activists that are associated to the protests and in some cases riots. For example, find an article from the past week that does not mention BLM and protests less than twice each. Yes, not all protests end in riots, I'm aware. But the short of it is, no protests, no riots. These polls are saying, generally speaking, the majority of people in the United States, when push comes to shove, do not and will not side with the association DE chose to endorse with. They might say pleasant things about it at the surface level, much like what DE did on Twitter in the first place, but outside of superficial pleasantries, it's more important the protests stop because they lead to riots. I don't want to focus too much on these, as it's a very deep well full of nuance and details and valid points all around. I'm just trying to give a quick summary of a very big issue. You might be saying, but the police themselves are escalating things into riots, and you'd have plenty of clips online to support that. I'm not disagreeing with you. You can also say BLM has a lot more to it than just the extremist elements that they were quickly painted with in the news when first starting out years ago, and I'm not disagreeing with you there either. All I'm saying is, bird's eye view of the situation, this endorsement, and especially this taunting by Steve, is not looking good for DE. Heck, many on the fence will be turned off right off the bat, knowing that the $25,000 they pledged came from money that you, the players, have collectively given them via Platinum and Tenogen. If the numbers and all that are lost on you, politics at a glance is very simple. About 40% of people are on one side, about 40% of people on the other, and about 20% right in the middle. Generally speaking, when an idea or law comes out that one side would approve, the vast majority of that side will agree, and the vast majority of the other side will disagree. This is why during speeches you'll see one side stand and cheer and shout and everything is awesome, while the camera cuts to the other side and it's just a sea of unhappy zombies staring into the distance. It's no different than infomercials with the dreary black and white footage of the competitor's product being used incorrectly by a doofus who looks endlessly confused, and then the camera cuts to a full color footage and everybody's smiling and all the problems are gone. It's no different. It's the same thing. So when someone says 40% support something, it's not really that important. It's sort of expected for whatever side's going to automatically sign off on, and the other side's going to sign not off on. Also, depending on how the question was phrased, in what order the question was asked, who asked the question, what part of the country, state, county levels even was asked, how many of each side of the aisle were asked, that's all going to alter the results some. Preferably, you're going to want bigger range, more polls, and add them all up and then average it out, and that'll boost your accuracy. So 52% in favor means not just one side liked it, but also a chunk of that middle section, and maybe even some from the opposing side. 71% is darn high. Looking at the details, as expected, the split was across party lines, where the red team strongly supported it the most, the blue team the least. But interestingly, the middle group didn't just like it a little, but twice as much as the blue team. Even more interesting if you add strong support with somewhat support, though the blue team likes it by far the least, as again to be expected, even they approve of National Guard support at 58%. And for the record, I think it's overall pretty fair to say these numbers are likely to increase as time goes on, and not the other way around. People like the peaceful stuff, but no one likes the violence. The longer we have violent nightly riots, which has been a daily occurrence if I'm not mistaken, the more these numbers will not go in DE's favor. Again, if the opposing side is the one that tends to harumph and downplay the ideas the hardest, and even they support this at nearly 60%? Oh man, was this totally not the hill to die on. Based on past occurrences, usually when this realization hits, anyone loosely following happenings on Twitter, or even somewhat lately, will recognize how often the phrase, or something close to, "If you don't think XYZ, unfollow now, I don't want your money," that usually means they got called out and they just don't want to hear it anymore. Because, that worked so well for Battlefield 5. And unfortunately for DE, it gets way worse from there. Rounding out the numbers, we have the middle team supporting it with 69% total, giggity, and the red team at a whopping 86%. So depending on which polls you prefer, Steve didn't just tell off people who don't like his beliefs. He more specifically told 52 to 86% of past, present, and future players, essentially, do not play my game. I don't like that you don't agree with me. I will gladly make fun of you for your beliefs, and I don't want your money. Congratulations on the emotional gratification. I hope the likes and retweets are worth it. This is why they say always, always, always avoid politics and religion when it comes to business. Stick to charities. It makes you look good no matter what you do. In summary, as a business, it is best to avoid politics and religion, especially now as the two has seemingly become one and the same and twice as volatile. Potential olive branch and turnaround. Of course, this isn't guaranteed. I don't think anyone can be 100% accurate all the time, but the math is not favorable to them at all. More than likely it's going to go the way so many other online games have. It's just going to bleed out slowly over time. So hopefully not as fast as Crucible, my goodness. But the player base will steadily shrink over time, and then it compounds and gets worse and worse. But there is a chance at a turnaround though. Perhaps Steve didn't intend to mock Dan after his removal, and the whole thing was a terribly timed accident. A total brain dead, brain fart moment, and it looks way worse than intended. The solution there would be to pull the tweet, say sorry to Dan as that was not his intention, and extend a token olive branch back to the partner program that Dan would obviously deny. This is the one and only real undo DE can run, but the odds of it happening are getting slimmer by the day, and I don't see this panning out. I can't say when this is going to happen, but I can say I do not see them coming back from this. The numbers were already before the quarantine. During it, nothing was added to keep them playing. Nothing good, anyway. Now with gaming options opening up again, and deals are all over the place on Steam and GOG and the like, players are going to spread out even further. I got a few comments from Newer Tenno asking about stance mods this week, and after I helped out one of them, they said thanks, and that they hope the PlayStation servers get active again. I disagree with some of the business decisions and a bunch of in-game things they pull sometimes, but still, as a gamer, that hurt to see someone new to the game hoping the players would come back again. I felt like, I don't know, a zombie survival movie or something. It's like I just cheered up that one kid that doesn't understand yet that they lost their entire family to the Horde, and they let out a, I can't wait to have my family meet everyone, and you know, they're long gone, man. It's even got the emoji smiley face in there too. Feels. Anyway, before I get even more depressed, to cap off the second part of the video, let me conclude that when it comes to politics and virtue signaling, it doesn't tend to sell product. It might work short term, but in the long run, you chase off more customers than you could have ever possibly gained. And there is room in there for niche things like t-shirts or whatever, right? But pre-existing brands? That fragments your player base big time, man. Best case scenario, you catch the entire 40% that you're aiming for while turning away the other 40 to 60 in the process. And that's best case. I'm thinking that this was an IRL knee-jerk patch. They tend to do this a lot in-game where they know something's wrong and it needs to be done, but they focus way more on the speed than accuracy or even listening to what the player's concerns are at the time. So they tend to rush things in an attempt to band-aid something together, and just the act of applying the band-aid patch is considered good enough. The players always tend to help them out fixing things properly for them anyway. But this is one thing we can't. And when the lead dev goes on Twitter and shouts, "My way or take a vacation," folks are going to take a vacation. Only they ain't coming back. On a much lighter note, while I mentioned DE didn't say who decides what is offensive or just who found it offensive, since I was busy trying to check which of Dan's tweets might have triggered someone, I ran across a curious sight. Potentially the two partners that got Dan removed. I believe it started because of Steve's initial message, and then Dan said his ALM hashtag. Then they started spamming Digital Extremes with tweets, retweets, and just obnoxiously bumping the topic in an effort to get their way and Dan taken out of the program. I'll refer to them as Account 1 and Account 2. Account 1. Hey Warframe, I'd love to see a commitment to removing partnered content creators who are pushing anti-black rhetoric right now. You can start with the ones who have spent the last few days publicly raging about the fact that Steve and Rebecca retweeted that racism is bad. They continued, people keep asking me to send them screenshots and links, and I will definitely send those to DE, but otherwise won't be replying to everyone with them. If you want to look into it, everything I've seen has been posted publicly and quite easy to find. Another thread started by Account 2 the next day. LOL. I always hear this chatter about remove X from the Warframe partner program because of XYZ. But where are y'all at for the racist ass partner saying all lives matter? Y'all keeping that same energy? All lives matter. Now what Warframe partner do we know who said that right around this time? Thank you! Why isn't everyone more angry about this? There shouldn't be racists in the Warframe partner program. People who tweet that Black Lives Matter is a lie, for example, should be removed. And geez, now that I think about it, that title they quoted there seems awfully familiar too. That's the one Dan retweeted to Steve a couple times, didn't he? I'll come back to this in just a second. It's a juicy one. I agree hands down, but that's just my perspective. I'm gonna let digital extremes speak with their actions in the days to come. If they believe strongly enough in what they preach, they'll make the decision to do it themselves, instead of being harassed into it. I love how this is telling DE exactly what they want to have happen, but pretending like they can't hear, even though they literally tag them in the middle of that same request. Gee, it sure would be a shame if my friend in the kitchen brought me a bag of chips on their way back to... Oh, thank you. How'd you know I wanted one of these? You're awesome. And then they try to paint it out like, it's okay. DE's smart. DE will figure out what I'm trying to say without me having to say it, even though they just literally did a sentence before. So we have loudly suggesting things publicly to them, saying this is just the partner's opinion, and then closing it out with guilting them into proving how much DE really believes in the cause. If they believe strong enough in what they preach, they'll do what I want them to, instead of being harassed into doing it, like what we're literally doing right now. Tee-hee. Yeah, I'm betting that they're going to handle it soon, to be honest. I'm just surprised that more people aren't speaking up about the racism, because I know other people have seen it too. Yeah, I have a feeling they're going to handle it soon. Well, they got their wish, because I think, what was it, like 6 hours later, Dan got the boot? Now about that video they mentioned that Dan accidentally spammed Steve with that had the two men saying it's a lie and all lives matter, and did I forget to mention those guys were African American? So what are these two partners saying based on their actions then? Black lives matter, just not their voices? If all the messages and sayings and retweets I've seen on Twitter are accurate, if you are following the cause, which you claim to be, aren't you supposed to be listening and uplifting black opinions above your own? In this case, since Dan retweeted their video many times, he's actually doing what the cause asks for. Yet you're trying to silence him for doing so. Wouldn't that mean you two are actually doing what you're chastising Dan of? And he's not even doing that. He retweeted and spread their opinions and life experiences, and you two deplatformed him from Warframe for doing that. That means you two broke the oath to your cause, not him. He never signed up on it, yet he still managed to push it along further than you guys did. Does that not mean DE did as well, by extension? Only curious. The games people play to make themselves simultaneously the victim and victor fascinates me. Why is it okay for Team 1 to do something, but when Team 2 does it, suddenly Team 1 doesn't like it anymore? It's like a game of tag where both sides are the runner and it at the same time. I could just watch it play out for hours. But let's finish this video off, shall we? With Dan's removal, DE themselves said it was offensive tweets that got him ousted, and it looks very much like we found out just who was, using air quotes here, offended by his tweets and got him removed. Two people that did not like Dan for some time. Curiously, they were also the same two people that were, what's the right word? Well, let's just say the same duo just happened to be closely located, unless I'm mistaken, when it came to the rather similar removal of Fostinator. Immediately removed from their position due to a supposed complaint of offensive nature. Check. Based entirely on tweets made in their past. Check. One or both of these parties were involved in said tweets. Check. It was involving a disagreement over politics. Check. Other people even noted how much Dan's removal felt like Fost 2.0 in the replies. Well, carrying on, as Dan was removed for his apparently naughty tweets, DE just said every single Warframe partner can be as well. I mean, they already removed Dan for it. Naturally, all partners are now instantly bound to the same standards. But what could possibly be offensive to the bulk of the state's population? Maybe, tweeting the President of the United States directly and saying negative things about him. See this 40% of the states here that we talked about earlier? Yeah, they're not going to be too happy to see that right off the top. And maybe even some of that 20% in the middle, depending on how rude you handle yourself. Again, you're free to say whatever you like. I don't mind, but all opinions and tweets are on the table with DE now. This was totally not a really stupid can of worms on their part to open. Let's see how it goes. Suck a moose. Well, that's pretty weak to start with, but it's okay. Just getting started, got plenty more to go through. Riots in the streets, police murdering citizens in cold blood, army called in, 40 million unemployed, over 100,000 dead in the past. Okay, gonna cut you off there, but this is extremely boring and unimaginative. I'm almost... Oh, there it is. I'm yawning just talking about this. Where's the pizzazz? If anything, I found this tweet offensively boring. Next. America's freedoms were built by civil disobedience. You'll go down in history as the pathetic, cowardly bad guy. There you go. Now you're getting the hang of it. Personal attacks. That's the professional Warframe partner way to do it. Last round, kid. Make it count. Don't worry, sweetie. You're safe in your coward's bunker. You may have to live in shame as a failure, a snake, and a draft dodger, scared little baby of a man. Now that's what I'm talking about. Really give it to the leader of the free world. That's going to tick off quite a bit of the 40% on the red team, though few of them are going to laugh it off as they've heard way worse from TV show hosts. But what you lost out on them, I got a feeling you're going to pick up a sizable portion of the middle team as they prefer folks to just get along and be peaceful. And even though it's about Trump, even got some of the team blue on board as they too would prefer if things would stabilize, and maybe antagonizing the guy with the new codes wouldn't help matters there at all. So you got about 30 red, 15 middle, 10 blue for a 55% on the offensometer. Not bad. Let's see what the second account can do. They only seem to have sent the one recently, so hopefully they can put some stank on this tweet. Account 2. Trump tweeted, of course, "Make America Great Again." Second account says in response, "Weird, so you're actually asking for a coup d'etat." "I am just an uncultured American swine, so that is a Google." A coup or coup d'etat is the forcible removal of an existing government from power through violent means. Violent means, that's a hard sell on the offensometer guy. Typically, it is an illegal, unconstitutional seizure of power by a political faction, the military, or a dictator. Yeah, that's going to be quite the hard sell. Definitely not getting any of the Team Red's 40%. Based on how extreme that is, gonna have to give you nearly all the middle team points. I'll be nice and only do 16%, but even joking about a violent takeover when we already know quite the vast population are against the violence in general, that's pretty fringe support territory. So yeah, should technically be more than this, but as he didn't wish it upon him or suggest it should happen, I'll take off a good behavior bonus and say only 20% of Team Blue disagree with you. So all in all, that's calculator real quick, 76% on the offensometer. This is how it's done. Now just focus and keep it together, account 1. You'll catch up to this. I believe in you. Again, I'm sure if something as minor as retweeting 2 African Americans talking about their political opinions was enough to remove Dan, these more than quadruple qualify. Or wait, am I supposed to talk loudly and tweet them to get my way? Again, I'm sure if something as minor as retweet... No, I'm not going to do that. Again, don't talk to anyone mentioned. Don't even try to guess who it was. Just leave your comments and stuff in this comment section. We got enough chaos out there as it is. Let's try to keep things a bit more stable than what we left it this morning, shall we? One last suggestion for DE, mainly the workers at it. If any of you aren't entirely gun-ho on the idea of Black Lives Matter, odds are your coworkers know. That's a problem. Not for them, for you. Now that politics is part of the company officially, and guy up top seems to be very happy letting everybody know his opinions on the matter, and you can see just how people are treated that disagree with it, that's a liability both for you and the company in terms of appearances, and since they have allied with Team Blue's side of things, any Team Red and staff, and based on Twitter, I know they're there. I'm not gonna out you, but if I've seen it, again, your coworkers already know. I said in the beginning, try to just squirrel away some cash. This goes doubly for you guys. For the love of all things holy, do not, if they somehow don't know, do not start letting everyone in the office know, especially your community managers. Oh my God, if you saw the links on what they were sharing the other day. Yeah, I saw where that link pointed and posted. Not naming any names, but if you click a certain link, one of them retweeted, it goes to a document called Anti-Racism for White People. Because, you know, white people naturally need to be trained this, at least according to DE's community managers. Lovely links in there too, by the way. Not all are bad, but oh boy, are there some doozies inside. Don't be mad at me, I didn't retweet the link. For what it's worth, I'm super against companies that pull that whole "we own your soul, now give us your Twitter account" shenanigans, and highly suggest everybody who has a situation like that to make an alt account and only post pictures of how much you love eating lunch at your workplace. Don't give nobody nothing. Said similar last video about this. And you know what? Let's do a secret word too. If you made it all the way to the end of this, leave a comment below with the word pancake hidden in there somewhere, and I'll know you saw it to the end. But hide it good. None of that just pancake comments and nothing else. Maybe you like pancakes or you hate pancakes. Put it in your comments somewhere and let me know. And best of luck to DE and Warframe as well. I think they pretty much just anchored themselves to the ocean floor and it's set to rise pretty soon. And okay, but that's their call. They're gonna do what they think is right. Now I'm gonna go and take a few days off, as holy cow did this one take ages to put together. Stay safe out there and catch you next time, Legion. Take care.